Simply put, he is the first and the oldest superhero in history. His legacy spans over 80 years and continues to endure after all this time. The one and the only Man of Steel, Superman. Coming to prominence in the DC comic books, action comic books way back in the year 1938. Thousands of heroes have come along ever since and they've all carved out their own legacies, but Superman will be forever known as the very first to do it. My first recollection of Superman, unsurprisingly as I am an 80s baby, was Christopher Reeves, the man many consider to be the best live on-screen version of the Man of Steel. The first two movies he starred in remain fan favourites, and no one has quite had the screen presence of Christopher Reeves ever since. I could get into a whole monologue of live action movies and who was the best Superman, but for this video I am keeping it just strictly to the animated world. The superhero genre was thriving with both Marvel and DC lighting up the small screens with their superhero animated shows. Marvel with X-Men the animated series and Spider-Man, and DC with Batman the animated series. Given the long-standing connection with Batman and Superman as well as the tremendous success of Batman the animated series, it was inevitable that Supes was going to get his own animation show in this world of the DC animated universe, with Batman producer Bruce Timm at the helm, and it duly arrived in 1996. Now there's quite a bit to unpack here, but I will briefly start by talking about the animated Superman show from Ruby Spears in the 80s. This was my first time watching Superman in the animated world, and looking back on it as an adult, it was everything you'd expect an 80s cartoon show to be, with a bit of campy and corny dialogue from the heroes and the villains, and a straightforward story of good versus evil, and not too much in the way of complex storytelling. Not a bad show by any means, but for me as a kid, I didn't think it could get any better than that. Until the 96 animated show, making its debut in September 6, 1996. At this point in my young life, I was heavily into action animation shows, as I have mentioned in previous videos. My introduction to this show started surprisingly with the very first episode, which was the 3-part story, The Last Son of Krypton, which was a great way of introducing Superman to this new world, by telling an origin story of how Superman came to be. From his homeworld Krypton exploding, landing on Earth in his spaceship, and being discovered by John and Martha Kent, and then discovering and honing his powers as a teenager, and then leaving Smallville in his adult life and going to the city of Metropolis to become a reporter in disguise, whilst donning the red and blue tights as Superman, defending the city against domestic and alien threats. Now, whilst it's set in the same universe as Batman, the show is quick to establish Supes in his own right, and he's depicted as the goody boy scout wanting to do the right thing and help, which is a bit of a stark contrast to Bats, as he isn't the Avenger of the Night, but a shining beacon of hope to the city and those he protects. The two DC heavyweights do share tragic origins, as they both lost their parents as youngsters, but their takes on becoming superheroes vastly differ and shape their different personalities. The animation styles a little similar to Batman the Animated Series, or more so the follow-up, The Adventures of Batman and Robin, but this had a more brighter look and feel which perfectly fit Superman, which was the ideal way of differentiating him from Batman. Now, Superman is not quite the complex character Batman is, but the show did very well to depict Clark with some flaws to his persona, as well as depowering him a bit so he would be easier to write for, and not be this all-powerful being like he was depicted in his early run in the golden age of comic books. Like right here, for instance, him carrying planets. That's just too powerful. Given that he was a superpowered being, it was only fitting that Supes had superpowered enemies to bring balance to the show. Like all heroes, they each have their main rogue gallery, and Supes was no different. Whilst not as massive as Batman or Spider-Man in terms of massive rogue gallery, there were definitely some standout villains. Starting off with John Corbin, aka Metallo. He makes his first appearance in part 3 of The Last Son of Krypton. He is part of a hitman squad which have stolen Lex Luthor's power suit, as part of a setup operation by Lex himself into having the US government pay him billions for a second suit, as it could trigger fears of Kaznia attacking the US with Lex's first power suit. During a showdown with Superman in the suit, Corbin is defeated and sent to prison. Following this, in episode 7, The Way of the Flesh, this sees the true birth of Metallo. In prison, he's contracted a fatal disease, but he's offered a lifeline when Lex Luthor transfers his being into a cyborg, but in return, he has to kill Superman. Just to make things a little worse, Corbin is powered by kryptonite, Superman's weakness, and as expected in their first encounter, he duly beats him up in a one-on-one confrontation. Corbin, however, discovers that he can no longer feel in his new body and goes absolutely stark raving mad, and he thus permanently becomes Metallo. A final showdown with Superman sees Metallo get sent to the bottom of the ocean, beaten for now, but still well and truly alive. He subsequently returns and has several more confrontations, and mainly due to the kryptonite as well as him being a very powerful cyborg, Metallo was one of Superman's strongest and most feared foes. Next up we have Parasite. A lowly janitor down on his luck named Rudy is involved in an accident and is splashed with some radioactive chemicals, which transforms him into the villainous Parasite, capable of draining the life force out of any living being and harnessing their memories, and in the case of super beings, their powers. And this does not bode well for Supes, and during their first encounter he completely demolishes him, and to make things worse, Parasite has his memories and now knows of his dual identity, and sneak attacks him, draining his energy and capturing him whilst being able to constantly drain him at will. Thanks to Jimmy Olsen, Supes is able to escape, and after a hard-fought battle involving a protective suit, he beats Parasite and sends him to a holding cell in Star Labs. Now, like Metallo, Parasite is another feared and powerful enemy of Supes. I'm going to butcher the name on this one, Spitlick. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Now here is one of Superman's oddest and most unique enemies. On first look, he's very cartoonish and more annoying than terrifying, but in actuality he is a very powerful being with the ability to warp reality to whatever he wants. In this episode, I can't pronounce that, he appears from his home-based 5th dimension, and he latches onto Supes and sees him as a challenge and basically annoys or torments him to no end, until Supes tricks him into saying his name backwards. This makes him banned for 3 months, to which he reappears and is tricked again and again and again. The little trollop has a hot-looking woman, but then again with his powers, why not? He somehow manages to change the rules about disappearing when Supes has to say it twice now. So in the final showdown of sorts, Supes gets Mixie to spell his name backwards twice and beats him for the final time, banishing him back to his 5th dimension. But in typical villain fashion, except in this case very goofy, he vows his revenge on Supes. Now in the grand scheme of things, he was Supes' most comical enemy. Another standout for was Bizarro, who starts out as a clone of Supes, created of course by Lex Luthor. A previous encounter with a mechanical dinosaur left traces of Supes' blood, which was used to create a clone. Due to the unstable nature of Kryptonian DNA, the clone becomes unstable and regresses the clone in terms of brain functionality, causing his very distorted appearance. He escapes Lex Luthor's clutches and goes on a rampage in Metropolis and goes after Lois, thinking he is only protecting her. Bizarro ends up taking her to the lab where all the other clones are stored. Lex had planned on creating an army of Supermen all programmed to obey him. Bizarro completely flips out and ends up setting the whole lab on fire. It's Supes to the rescue, and during the struggle, Bizarro comes to the realization that he is the clone and not the real Superman. He does help them escape, but he gets caught up in the explosion. But of course, he survived, and reappears later in the episode Bizarro's World, where he discovers Superman's Fortress of Solitude, and he learns of the destruction of Krypton. He tries to recreate the whole scenario by capturing Lois and allowing missiles to blow up Metropolis. Supes again to the rescue, and he's able to convince Bizarro of his wrongdoings. He ends up creating a mini getaway for Bizarro to stay and keep him out of trouble.
I'm ever so sorry to spoil your nice celebration, But I have a very important message for your boss, Mr. Mannheim.
What do I need help for? I'm pure energy now. And besides, I got enough help from you the other night.
See? Someone's paying me a heap of cash for your carcass, and the main man always delivers.
Each of these villains posed very strong threats to Soup, but none were more prominent than the unholy trinity. His eternal foe, billionaire Lex Luthor, the Kryptonian AI known as Brainiac, and my personal favourite villain in the whole gallery, the warlord known as Darkseid. Starting with Brainiac, he is the highly advanced supercomputer of Krypton. In the very first episode, Last Son of Krypton, Jor-El discovers that Krypton is no longer stable and advises the elders that the whole planet must be evacuated, but no one believes him, not even his own wife. Brainiac assures the Kryptonians that there is no issue, but secretly he's engineering his own escape from Krypton, as he too knows that Krypton is dying. He transfers himself into a satellite and creates an android body for his form, leaving Krypton to perish. He shows up in the episode Stolen Memories pretending to come in peace, and negotiates a plan with Lex Luthor to share information, but he's secretly planning to betray him and use the information to kill Earth and assimilate all its information. He also comes face to face with Superman, who tells him of the whole story of Krypton and tries to get him to join him in his quest of exploring the galaxies and assimilating their data. After touching one of Brainiac's orbs in a dream sequence, Soups discovers what really happened in the final days of Krypton and learns of Brainiac's real intentions, leading to a confrontation between the two. Soups gets the upper hand and wins this battle, and recovers the Kryptonian orb held by Brainiac and stores it in his own Fortress of Solitude. Brainiac has survived this encounter and reappears in the episode Ghost in the Machine. Having downloaded himself into Lex Luthor's computer systems, he captures him and forces him to make a new body. During the struggle, Lex is shot in the back by Brainiac, an incident that would come into play years later in Justice League Unlimited. But that's for another time. Superman again manages to come out on top between the two. Brainiac would go on to cause even more trouble for Superman when he travels back in time to try and kill a teenage Clark in the episode New Kids in Town, but Clark is helped by the Legion of Superheroes. The battle between the two would carry on into future shows Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. In the grand scheme of things, given his Kryptonian origins, Brainiac is arguably Superman's most powerful enemy. However, this next entry into Superman's rogue gallery could give him a big run for his money. The powerful warlord known as Darkseid. He is the ruler of the planet Apokolips and has only one goal: to attain the formula known as the anti-life equation. With this, he can enslave the entire multiverse and recreate it in his own image. He makes his first appearance on the show in the episode Tools of the Trade, in a brief cameo. His first full appearance in the episode Father's Day, Darkseid's son Kalibak wants to prove that he is worthy to his father and challenges Superman to a showdown. It's the typical formula of Soups getting beat up but overcoming the odds and coming out the winner. He finally comes face to face with Darkseid, who easily beats him with his beams and warns him of the incoming invasion and that he should pledge his allegiance to him or be killed. He returns in the two-part story Apocalypse Now. Superman encounters Orion, an escapee from Apokolips, who warns of Darkseid's arrival and informs him of his rise to power. It's an epic-sized battle in this two-part story, and Darkseid really shows his dominance here. And it seems all is lost until the warriors from New Genesis, as well as the Metropolis Police Department, gather to help Superman and drive Darkseid away. Darkseid retreats, but not before killing Dan Turpin of the Metropolis Police Department. This sends Superman into a blind rage with the world watching. From both a physical and psychological standpoint, Darkseid pushed Superman to his very limits. This would come to a head in the final two episodes of the whole series, the two-part story Legacy. Superman is abducted and completely brainwashed and leads Darkseid's armies to attack Earth. This sends Metropolis into a complete state of shock and betrayal. It also presents Lex Luthor with the perfect opportunity to lead the US military with his Operation Project Achilles to take out Superman. Supergirl, his cousin, has been trying to fill in for him since he vanished by using robot clones. Lex discovers the truth and that Superman vanished and has now been brainwashed as he reappeared. And this looks like a concocted plan by the super cousins to destroy the planet. So they are both hit by a kryptonite-powered missile which takes them both out. Now both of them are held at the military-based prisons, where Clark regains his memories and he recalls the abduction. With the help of Lois Lane, he manages to escape with Kara, who's been badly injured, and then goes off to face Darkseid in a final showdown. He narrowly manages to beat him, but the damage had been done. Superman had lost the faith of the public and was no longer regarded as a hero. But through Lois's belief in him, he has hope he can rebuild the faith of the public, one person at a time. So as I said earlier, Darkseid really pushed Superman to his limits, and in my opinion in this series, he is Superman's most powerful and dangerous foe. This brings me to his final major baddie, Lex Luthor. Like the Joker is to Batman, Lex Luthor is to Superman, his most persistent foe. Now Lex Luthor is a brilliant scientist and an industrial multi-billionaire, with a wealth of resources at his disposal. He is a constant menace to Superman and has indirectly played a hand in creating Superman's other villains, like Metallo and Bizarro. Now Lex doesn't possess any powers, but thanks to his intelligence and his team of scientists, he can create a number of powerful weapons to use against his enemies, with Superman being his prime target. Things don't get off to a good start between the two when in part 3 of The Lost on Krypton, Superman is aware of Lex Luthor's schemes in controlling Metropolis and warns him that he'll be watching him, much to Lex's frustrations. Supes, as we know, is allergic to kryptonite, so in the episode A Little Piece of Home, Luthor discovers that fact and lays out a trap to kill him. In the episode Brave New World, we saw an alternate reality in which Lois was accidentally pulled into, and in this world Lex Luthor is the ruler of Metropolis and Superman works alongside him, and together they have Metropolis under a tyrannical rule. This was the vision Lex had with wanting to control Superman. In this world, Lois has died, and this has sent Supes into a dark path which led to his alliance with Lex. Now upon discovering that the other Lois, the real one, Supes begins to undo all the wrong he caused, especially when he discovers that Lex was using him as a crutch to have him under his control. Lex Luthor attempts to kill this version of Superman with kryptonite, and when that plan fails thanks to the resistance, Lex is foiled and escapes with Superman in hot pursuit. A struggle between the two ends up with Lex crashing into a statue and presumed dead in this reality. Now the real Superman, keep up with me, the real Superman appears and brings Lois home, with the alternate Superman left to fix what was damaged in that reality. Lex would go on to appear concurrently throughout this series, and their rivalry would continue on in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. Lex may not have been Superman's most physically and powerful foe, but from a psychological standpoint, he was probably the most ruthless and cunning villain Superman had to deal with. Now, unlike Batman, Superman didn't exactly have a small gang of assistants to help him, but he did have his allies and his love interest. His pal, Jimmy Olsen, armed with his trusty camera, who for the majority of the show is more of a background character, but he did have some standout moments, like helping Superman beat Parasite the first time around, and then later teaming with Supergirl as she attempts to take down a criminal group known as Intergang. Jonathan and Martha Kent, his adoptive Earth parents, whom he always turned to for advice when they needed it. Again, they were more background characters. His cousin Supergirl, who's already been mentioned a few times, makes her animated on-screen debut in the series in the two-part story Little Girl Lost. Supes is travelling through space and discovers the leftovers of Krypton, but he also discovers the survivor of a neighbouring planet Argo, his cousin Kara, aka Supergirl. He brings her back to Earth with him. She's young, feisty and impetuous, and she wants to follow in Clark's footsteps and become a hero, to which he is against as he feels that she is not quite ready. She ignores his warnings and along with Jimmy goes after Intergang. There it's revealed that the mastermind behind the operation is Granny Goodness, one of Darkseid's top henchmen. During the ensuing battle, Supergirl is overwhelmed by Granny and her team of Furies. Superman arrives to even the odds, and then he promptly gets beaten up and captured and taken to Apokolips. I thought he was stronger than this, seriously. Supergirl has to fly solo and save Superman from Darkseid's Furies, and then stop the comet that Darkseid has launched from wiping out the Earth. Supergirl steps in and prevents the comet from crashing, proving her worth as a superhero. Now, we only see her a handful of times in the whole series, and it leaves you pining for more animated adventures with her. Now, she, along with a handful of other DC superheroes, would go on to appear in the Justice League animated shows. I feel personally it was a missed opportunity to create an animated show with an established female character like her in this universe. Now, with Bruce Timm at the helm and his track record, I know it would have been a success. Ah well, what you gonna do? I guess there's always Melissa Benoist's version of Supergirl in the CW shows to fall back on. A brief mention of Clark's first love, Lana Lang. In this series, she's a successful fashion designer with a bit of glamour to her. This Lana is a far cry from Kristen Crook's portrayal in Smallville. Lana is aware of Clark's big secret as they grew up together and was around him as he began to develop his powers. Now, her knowing played a helpful part in Clark retaining his identity in the episode The Late Mr. Kent, when Clark was presumed dead but was all aroused as he was the victim of an attempted murder and he had to find a way to catch the criminals without revealing his identity. She appears in only 3 episodes in the whole series to me, which is a bit of a surprise considering her history in the comic books. Still, her appearances are a nice little addition to the show. Rounding off with Superman's allies is his legendary main squeeze, hotshot reporter Lois Lane. The whole dynamic between Lois and Clark is canon in Superman folklore. He arrives in Metropolis as a new reporter and is paired with her. She's a very confident, daring, sarcastic, brave and caring kind of girl. She falls for Superman. Unbeknownst to her, he is in her presence every day as Clark Kent, whom she doesn't have any feelings for, so it's quite the interesting conundrum between the two. Now, in this series, Lois surprisingly never finds out about his true identity, which is quite surprising considering that the adventures of Lois and Clark with Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher had been running a few years prior, and that exposed the relationship between the two. But that wasn't the case here. And even in future shows, the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, Lois still never found out the truth, so that will forever be a surprise to me. I already mentioned earlier Lois's role in the episode Brave New Metropolis. Throughout the series, she was an ever constant in Superman's life, always putting her life in danger to get the exclusive story for the Daily Planet, whilst trying to compete with Clark as well. She does profess her feelings to the big guy, but he never really reciprocated. The final episode, Legacy Part 2, really tested her loyalty and feelings to the big man, as everyone had all but given up on Superman as a hero after his brainwashing by Darkseid. Even after he recovers and tries to make amends, but feels it's hopeless, Lois restores his faith and believes in him to turn things round, and it's very fitting that the final shot of the whole series is just of the two of them. Well, after covering a large number of his villains and his allies, and some of the interlocking story arcs, it would remain amiss not to mention a few notable names. The first is Superman's frenemy, if you will, in Batman. As it was a shared universe, it was inevitable that the two would cross paths, and it surely happened in the 3-part story World's Finest, which pits the two heroes against each other at first, but then they later team up to take on the deadly duo of Lex Luthor and the Joker. This team up, I feel, was the first step into creating a Justice League show. The two would feature in a series package called the New Batman and Superman Adventures, which was basically an hour and a half of episodes from Batman and Superman the Animated Series, and the New Batman Adventures. With the Justice League shows to come, there will be more to hear from the world's finest. And the next notable name is the man behind the voice of Supes, actor Tim Daly, of Wings and Madam Secretary fame. He does a brilliant job of depicting Superman as a strong, kind, caring, and at times vulnerable character. Now, whilst it's not quite on the same level as Kevin Conroy's depiction of Batman, he does a very worthy job of portraying the Man of Steel in this show. Lex Luthor is voiced by another voice legend, Clancy Brown, who I first became familiar with as his portrayal of Raiden in the animated Mortal Kombat show Defenders of the Realm. His voice is instantly recognizable, and he's gone on to voice a ton of animated characters in his legendary career. He even made a few on-screen appearances in the CW show Flash. The role of Lex Luthor was made perfectly for him, and whenever I read the comic books, it's always Clancy's voice I hear, and you can't argue, he did the character great justice. Now, while Superman the animated series didn't last as long as Batman, nor was it quite as good, it more than carved its own path and created an excellent show depicting Superman against powerful enemies whilst trying to live his life as Clark Kent, mild-mannered news reporter. I never really liked the way that sounded. It showed his vulnerable side in dealing with matters of the heart whilst being the superhero that everyone needs, giving him an almost human-like relatability. Of all of Superman's solo animated shows, and shows in general, I believe this is one of the best portrayals of the character, and with the makers of Batman the Animated Series behind it, it was always going to be a success. The one and only Man of Steel, Superman.